James Shirk is on the line with us, Senior Policy Analyst with the Heritage Foundation in Labor Economics, heritage.org, the website. James, welcome.
Hi, thank you.
Thanks for joining us. Let's talk about the minimum wage here for a moment. There's this new report out suggesting that for folks who don't like subsidizing low-wage employees with six basic federal programs, the Earned Income Tax Credit, the food stamp program, SNAP, the the Section 8 housing vouchers, the TANF, temporary assistance for needy families, and welfare cash assistance. People who don't like those programs, we can cut those programs by $7.6 billion a year, 45% of today's workers, by simply paying people $10.10 an hour. Blowing up this business model that Walmart and McDonald's are using of, they pay their employees so little that you and I have to pay our taxes to cover their living costs. What's wrong with that?
Well, the problem, as Jason Furman, who's now the chairman of President Obama's Council of Economic Advisors, has pointed out, is that the existence of programs like food stamps, like Medicaid, like all the safety net programs you just mentioned, it actually causes Walmart and other employers of low-skilled workers to pay higher wages. So the existence of these programs is not so much a taxpayer subsidy to these companies. It actually slightly raises their costs. And the reason is because you have programs like this, it reduces the labor supply. Translating that out of economic speak, that it makes it easier for people to get by without working a full-time job, and so more people do.
What country do you live in?
Same country Jason Furman lives in.
We have one of the loosest labor markets we've had since the 1920s.
Look, this is the fact is that the labor market would be such that
our labor market has collapsed over the last 34 years since Reaganomics was put into place. When Reagan came into office, the biggest employer in this country paid $54 an hour in today's dollars on average to its workers. It was General Motors. Today, the biggest employer in our country is paying less than $10 an hour on average. It's Walmart. We've seen a complete change in the way that we run our economy, and not only is household income down by 9% in real dollars since 1980, but it now takes 1.8 people to earn what one person used to earn. I mean, you look at 2.3 people. You look at household income, and you've got basically people working 2.3 jobs to do what one person used to do in 1980. How is that? How is that a tight labor market? That looks to me like an incredibly loose labor market.
Well, again, what Jason Furman finds is that when you have more of these benefit programs, you enable people to drop out of the labor market. We've seen a huge drop in labor force.
But that's not what's happening. People are dropping out of the labor market because there's no damn jobs.
Well, I mean, again, the question is, what is the effect of these programs on the margin? I mean, there's obviously the economy's been hit. Now, the fact
you're making and let's take Jason Furman out of the equation. He's not here to defend himself or to explain what his positions are. You assert your position, I'll assert mine. The simple fact of the matter here is that the labor market is a function of the demand for labor versus the supply of labor. And as we have pursued neoliberal policies, the policies that Heritage advocates, free trade policies, for example, doing away with tariffs, these kinds of anti-protectionist policies, what we've seen is that the supply of labor has increased because a lot of the demand for labor has moved overseas.
Well, I think you're right. Certainly, we agree that wages are going to be a result of the intersection between the supply and demand for labor. But what pretty much all the studies find is that programs, and again, there's good arguments for having these programs. We certainly need a safety net. But one of the consequences of the safety net is that you reduce the supply of labor.
No,
I mean, if you look at the labor force participation rate right now, even for prime-age adults, it's incredibly low.
It's low because there's no jobs.
Well, that's one way of looking at it. Another way of looking at it is you've got an enormous number of prime-age people who are not in the labor force right now. That's practically the definition of reduced labor supply.
But see, I mean, okay, the assumption underlying all of your logic up to this point, if I have this right, James, is that if people have the option of getting goodies from the government, they will stop working. And I think that if you look at the history of this country, I mean, we had fairly generous benefits back during the 60s with the war on poverty, Lyndon Johnson's war on poverty, that lasted solidly into the early 80s. And it didn't decrease workplace participation. In fact, we had one of the strongest workplaces in the world in the 60s and 70s and early 80s. And then Reaganomics hit us, and then in the 90s, you had Clintonomics with those free trade policies, which were really an extension of Reaganomics. And arguably, Nixon had kicked this off. Let's open the world to China, and now, I mean, this is David Ricardo 101 on labor, 1807 was it? He published that. This is nothing new.
Well, I think you're, again, mistaken there on the amount we spend on welfare. I mean, the welfare state is substantially larger now than it was in the 1960s.
Only because our population is larger. Our population was half of what it is today in 1960.
Well, but in terms of, again, the overall amount, the number of programs, disability insurance is now covering roughly 6% of the adult population. Food stamps now cover far more. There's far more programs. We spend about $1 trillion on means tested
because there's far more need. Back in the 60s, we had an economy that worked. Back in the 60s, you had people who, with just a high school diploma, one person could raise an entire family, buy a house, take a vacation every year. At the end of 20, 30 years, 40 years in the workplace, have some equity and a decent retirement. Now that's all out the window after 34 years of Reaganomics.
Well, I'd encourage you to take a look at the Congressional Budget Office's data that they put together on household income. Your listeners can simply Google CBO for Congressional Budget Office.
But when you do that, compare individual income too, because household income is highly deceptive. The average household back in the 1960s had a little more than one person working. The average household today has a little more than two people working.
No, that's right. And that's why one of the things you should look at, what I'd encourage your listeners to look at, would be, again, Google CBO distribution of household income and taxes, and then they've got some supplemental tables you can go on and
But
look
it
at.
shouldn't be that way, should it? I mean, isn't the conservative position that kids should be raised by at least one of their parents?
Sorry, let me finish here. What I was going to say, look at the income of non-elderly, so we're not dealing with people retired, and households without children. So we're, again, not so much dealing with the situation of a two-income instead of one-income parents. So we're looking at non-elderly children and non-elderly households without children. And what you find is that since the late 70s, pretty much every single income quintile has seen their incomes go up over the past generation. What the CBO finds is that we are much better off now.
It's just that the top 1% has seen their income go up 348 times, and not even percent times. And we've seen the average income, individual income of workers go down 9%.
Well, again, look at it's very interesting. What you find is that, yes, the folks at the top, average incomes have gone up across the board for non-elderly households and, again, without children. Same is true of the other groups, but this deals with your.
But when you exclude households with children, you're excluding a large cohort of the working population of America.
It's true of both non-elderly households with children and without children. I'm just trying to respond to your point about the fact that you've got a lot more two-income couples now than before. Let's take that out of the equation.
I see that as a bad thing.
But it's true of both sets of data. What you see, though, is that the folks at the bottom, actually, the folks in the bottom quintile have seen their increase in market income. So not taxes, not government transfer programs, but market income has gone up by about 40% over the past generation. I consider that real progress. I look at the CBO's data. The numbers
over the past decade. What about the past 40 years? They're down 9%.
No, certainly. It was
since the Reagan presidency. Okay, James, we gotta boogie out of here. James Shirk, you can read all about it. Hang on just a second.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
James Shirk, Senior Policy Analyst with Labor and Economics at the Heritage Foundation. Heritage.org is the website. James, thanks for dropping by.
All right, thank you.
Good talking. We'll be back.